welcome to all of our returning guests, and there are many of you. I get the privilege of seeing the RSVPs as they come in, and it's always a pleasure to see people coming back for more. And I love this time around. I have to give you all definite kudos. We had so many questions in advance. This makes for a very robust session, so thank you for that. All right. For those of you who are joining us for the first time or haven't met me before, my name's Anabel Monson. I'm going to be your host and moderator today. All right, so on to the main event, what we're talking about today. We're focusing on hot topics and trends for global ops yet again, driven by really the latest and greatest of what's happening with our clients in the field, the trips that they're planning with us, and then the feedback that they're providing as they go out on their missions. And then holiday and seasonal travel destinations. This we started last week, and it's just been super popular, as you can imagine, the time of year, and the topic is blowing up our phones and emails. So hopefully some more answers today. And then your questions, we'll wrap up with those. We're going to go directly into those trends and insights. Let me tell you who you're hearing from today. Once again, Christine Vamvakas, our Senior Account Manager with Charter Management, and she's one of the key forces behind the weekly update that you receive from us via email on all operational issues. We also have the pleasure of having Zelda Evans with us from Odyssey Aviation in the Bahamas. Hi, Zelda. And then Estefania Rodriguez, Nia, with Universal Aviation Dominican Republic to share her operational expertise. So a pleasure to have you all here, but we're going to start with Christine as usual. We're going to put the spotlight on you. This time around, we're going to start with the Asia Pacific region. What's going on with India?
So with India, over the last week or so, we've heard conflicting information if you can travel there or not. So India has been gradually opening over the course of the last few months. So effective immediately, every person that has a valid visa to enter the country, with the exception of tourist, medical, and e-visas, are able to do so. Now, in order to go into India outside of your landing permit, you're going to need to get a COVID test 96 hours prior to arrival, fill out a self-declaration form, and then go about your way. The one thing to consider here is if you have relief crew coming in, there is the option of doing a COVID test on arrival, but be aware that the turnaround time is a minimum of 5 hours of wait time at the airport. So it's recommended to do that before getting there.
Great. Okay. And then we've also heard there's some movement in the Philippines. What's the operational picture like there?
So we've had some great movement there. Effective November 1st, people with valid visas can travel there. Now, this list contains a few different kinds. The ones primarily for this group is going to be a special investor visa, the 47A2 visa, which is a special business visa, and then the tourist visa, which is Section 9A. The regular business visa is still not an option, though. So with the tourist visa, it takes about 3 weeks to get. And then once you do that, you can make your arrangements to go directly there. What's unique about this location is that COVID testing is not required prior to arrival, but it's done on arrival. So when you arrive, you're going to take a COVID test, and then you're going to go to a government-approved hotel for either 12, 24, or 72 hours to wait for those results. So it comes out in those brackets, 12, 24, 72, depending on what the passengers are willing to pay for. If it's negative, then you go about your way. As far as the crew, we just found out this week that crew are exempt from COVID testing. And then outside of that, you'll have to fill out a self-declaration form.
Okay, thanks for that. And as far as crew rest in the region, any new notable locations?
So crew rest in the APAC region has been few and far between. We have found out that Sri Lanka, even though the airports are closed for international flights, they are available for ferry flights. So if you have crew going into the area and they need a crew rest, that's an option. You'll need to do your COVID testing, fill out your self-declaration form, and of course, you're going to have to self-quarantine at the hotel for the duration of the stay.
All right, now shifting geographic locations just a bit, we're going on to the Middle East. What's the latest on Saudi Arabia?
So for Saudi Arabia, you are able to go there. Of course, you're going to have your appropriate documentation for landing permit and visas. You're going to need a COVID test 72 hours prior to arrival, and that's for crew and passengers. You'll need to fill out a self-declaration form and download 2 different apps. The tricky part here is that upon arrival, you have to quarantine for 2 days. And then from that point on, you can move about your way. If your passengers are looking to omit from that quarantine period, they can reach out to their sponsor, their business contact, and see if they can make arrangements to get out of that.
All right, thank you. And then continuing in the Middle East, the latest on travel, well, as far as another option, maybe the UAE. What's the latest there?
So the UAE, you can travel there, but depending on the emirate you're looking to go to, you may have to quarantine. So out of the 7 emirates, right now, Dubai is the only one that does not require that quarantine. So US and EU passengers can travel there. For passengers, anybody from the age of 12 or older will need to get a COVID test, and that needs to be done about 96 hours prior to arrival. So once you do that, fill out your self-declaration, you're good to go. The unique part here is for crew. Unlike passengers, crew don't need to do a COVID test prior to entering the country, but they will have to quarantine for the duration of their stay in their hotel. If they would like to omit from that, they're going to have to make an appointment at a medical center in Dubai to get that done. So it cannot be done prior to arrival.
All right. All right, we're going to continue on to Europe. There's clearly a lot of focus on the European market right now because of the increase in the COVID cases. What does that mean right now for business aviation?
So essential travel in the region is still possible. That COVID cases are going up. We are seeing some countries go on lockdown. We're seeing some cities go on lockdown. So you may have to be aware that you may have to change your schedule. But regulatory-wise, things haven't changed. The only thing that's come up recently is that Canada was removed from the safe list from the EU. So though it's not a requirement for each EU country to adhere to that, we are seeing countries like Portugal update their NOTAM on those restrictions.
All right. And then another popular segment that we've been doing that I want to make sure we touch on, anything new and notable to avoid, the gotchas or things to be aware of as operators are planning?
So this week I wanted to mention Brexit, though it's not COVID related. It is coming up. December 31st is when it's going to take place. And as such, certain regulations and requirements are becoming a known fact. So what I wanted to do is mention it because we have published a great article on that, and we'll be posting it in the chat room for you to become kind of more intimate with the topic.
Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. And Lewis, if you wouldn't mind sharing that link, that would be helpful. We'll put that in the chat. Thanks, Christine. Okay, well, I guess last but not least, our topic for the overall topic for the session is holiday and seasonal travel destinations, part 2. You know, we got a lot of feedback that the Caribbean would be a great area to focus on. So what's the latest in the Caribbean?
So as far as the Caribbean, of course, holidays are about 2 weeks out. So outside of the Caribbean, all the locations to go to, the ones that I wanted to mention are, as far as the Caribbean, places like the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, St. Martin, St. Kitts. From there, you can look at Mexico, Costa Rica, the Maldives, French Polynesia, and the 2 additions I wanted to make were Turkey and Dubai.
Oh, okay, good. A little more off the beaten path. Okay, so thank you, Christine. That brings us insights from our guests. All right, we're going to hone in more on the Caribbean and 2 locations in particular. That brings us to Zelda Evans with Odyssey Aviation in the Bahamas. A pleasure to have you here. All right, so Zelda, what are those top leisure destinations right now within the Bahamas, and what does it look like in terms of the experience on the ground?
Good afternoon, everyone. The islands of the Bahamas announced on Saturday, November 1st, streamlined entry protocols that will enable visitors to better and more seamlessly enjoy the Bahamas vacation experience. The Bahamas is welcoming visitors from all countries. No restrictions on international travel, whether private or commercial aircrafts and yachts. The Bahamas is not just New Providence, the capital and business hub of the country. In order to experience the real Bahamas, you have to visit our family islands. All of our islands are open to welcome visitors. However, there are curfews presently in place in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Abaco. And there are protocols for persons to enter the country.
All right, so, and I think you mentioned that while you have some curfews in place, that they're starting to see some movement at a couple of the hotels when it comes to opening. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So for information based on New Providence, which is the business hub, the major resorts on New Providence, Bahama, the Atlantis, and the Hilton are still closed. They announced due to their sizes, they have phased reopenings. Bahama announced today that they will start their phased reopening on December 17th to welcome guests. But there are also other popular properties that are open. Albany, the Lyford Key, the one and only Ocean Club, the Island House, and the Warwick is opening on November 21st.
All right, so coming up soon. I guess too, from an operational perspective, let's focus in there procedures for arrivals and departures into the Bahamas. I know you had just a big change now with November 1st rolling up. And what do operators need to know now?
Okay, as of November 1st, the mandatory vacation in place requirements is replaced by COVID-19 health insurance, monitoring procedures, and on-island rapid tests for those staying longer than 5 days. So as of November 1st, to enter the Bahamas, all travelers will be required to obtain a COVID-19 RT-PCR test within 5 days prior to arrival. Apply for the Bahamas Health Visa at travel.gov.bs. For the duration of the visit, they'll have to complete a daily online health questionnaire. Take a COVID-19 rapid antigen test on day 5 of the visit unless they're departing on day 5 or before. Always wear a mask and always social distance. Exemption to these protocols, children aged 10 years and under are not required to take the COVID-19 RT-PCR test, but they are required to complete the Bahamas Health Visa. For pilots and crews entering the country and staying for less than 24 hours or overnight, they do not have to complete the RT-PCR test for staying less than 24 hours, but they are required to complete the Bahamas Travel Health Visa and upload their pilot identification. There is a fee for the travel visa, okay? And that is outlined in the links that we're going to share. Louis, could you upload them for us, please?
Yeah, I think he's in the midst. All right.
Okay. Included in the visa is COVID-19 health insurance, which will cover visitors for the duration of their stay in the event they become ill with COVID-19 while in the Bahamas. Protocols on island: wear your mask once you're away from your place of residence, sanitize, and practice physical distancing directions.
And Zelda, I recall from when we were talking in preparation for this today that, and just getting more familiar, so there are only just the 3 islands that have the greater set of restrictions, and on the rest of the Bahamas, it's really the restaurants, everything else is open, shopping areas open, correct?
Yes, on the other islands of the Bahamas, there's business as usual. The islands with the curfew and restrictions, I repeat, are New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Abaco. But all of the other islands, it's business as usual.
All right. And we had a request, I know, that came in earlier for Great Exuma. That particular, anything specific to share there, are the same qualifications you just gave us?
Same qualifications. Great Exuma is open. The good news is also for operators, you don't have to apply to actually fly into the Bahamas from an international destination. You're able to make all of your arrangements without having to receive prior approval from the Bahamas Civil Aviation Authority. And Odyssey, we do have an FBO location in Great Exuma.
Okay, good. All right, well, that is an excellent overview, Zelda. And clearly your background makes me more than want to take advantage and go for the upcoming winter break.
Come and visit us.
All right, so I'm going to then move on to our friend Estefania in the Dominican Republic. Welcome. First time joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored. I'm happy to be here.
A pleasure to have you. All right. So same thing. I'd love for you to give us some insights into how our guests can operate into the Dominican, the procedures for arrival and departure right now compared to previously before COVID, and then the health screening requirements and the rest.
Perfect. So first of all, the Dominican Republic has been preparing for this new plan of making you feel safe for all travelers coming to our country. You do not need a PCR test result to come to the Dominican Republic, but the authorities here do select random travelers to take a rapid COVID test, the one made from the blood sample of your fingertip. But if you do bring a COVID test with a result no longer than 5 days prior, you don't need to comply with it. Aside from the use of mandatory masks at all times in public spaces, including the airport, of course, they do make a temperature check at the moment of your arrival. Uh, for customs and immigration, the process is the same, and we do make sure that in our waiting areas, lounge and VIP, you don't feel overcrowded or anything. At all times, the social distancing is maintained.
All right. And
As,
then, no, go ahead,
no,
please.
no, that will be for that question.
So as far as the experience, so shopping areas are open, and I know that obviously our guests may have clients that are going to a private villa versus to a resort, but the resorts themselves are all open as well.
For sure. Well, let's start with Dominican Republic is the most beautiful country with weather and beaches, for sure. So I have made
Zelda
all
may argue
necessary
with you
plans.
just a bit.
I'm in love with my country. So to start, if you wish to stay at a villa when you visit Dominican Republic, then I recommend you stay at Casa de Campo in La Romana. You have so much tons of stuff to do. Your only restriction will be the use of masks in public areas, but they have restaurants, museums. Altos de Chabón is a very beautiful Mediterranean village that has been reconstructed to your enjoyment. If you wish to see beaches, stay at a 5 hotel resort, then Punta Cana is your place to go. An excellent thing that Dominican Republic government has made is that from the moment you check in one of one of our hotels, you are included in in a health insurance plan, and it covers all things related to COVID, everything, and it expires the moment you leave the country. As for Santo Domingo, which is our city, and if you wish to visit our colonial zone, then Santo Domingo is the way to go. As far as shopping centers and restaurants, the only restriction will be the use of mask. And it's important to mention that we do have a curfew that starts from 9 p.m. and ends at 5 a.m. On weekdays, and it starts from 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. on weekends. But just don't fret. It applies only at the city. But if you stay inside of a hotel or a closed gate community like Casa de Campo, it doesn't apply to you because you are considered to be in a tourist bubble. So it's just great, guys. You should visit us. You're gonna have fun.
All right, so somehow I'm going to have to make time to go to both the Bahamas and the Dominican over this
For
break.
sure.
Perfect. I see the burden's going to be on me on there. Excellent. Thank you, Nia. Okay, well, so I know we had, as I mentioned, a ton of questions that came to us in advance. So we've given Christine a bit of a breather. So she is ready to start answering all of those. Again, thank you for sending those in early. It makes it super helpful for research purposes to make sure we get you the right information. But as I say that, I want to remind you, please, and it looks like our chat has been super busy. It looks like we've got some great questions coming in there. So please go ahead. Now is a good time. Last chance, start putting them in. And a quick note about time as we get ready to roll quickly, rapid fire with Christine. We will clearly, I'm sure today, go over time. So be prepared. If you can stay with us, we're going to stay on as long as we've got someone joining us, and we're going to keep answering those questions. But if you have to drop off, completely understand, but good news, we are recording it, so we'll get the link out to you, okay? So let's keep going. All right, question number one, Christine. Lots of questions about seasonal travel. We're going to dig in. We had an inquiry about the U.S. Virgin Islands, operations, restrictions, etc. Can you give us more?
Yeah, so the U.S. Virgin Islands is a great destination. You need to do a COVID test 5 days prior to departure. You need to fill out an online screening form through their portal 5 days prior to arrival, and then expect to go through a screening procedure upon arrival at the airport.
All right. And then we have a question about Bermuda.
So for Bermuda, you can definitely travel there. The COVID test needs to be done between 7 days and 72 hours prior to arrival. You'll have to fill out a self-declaration form prior to entry, I think 48 hours prior to entry. Upon arrival, you're going to have to go through a screening process, complete another COVID test, and then you're going to have to quarantine in your hotel until that second result is known. That's usually at about a 24-hour time frame, and then you would be free to go if both results are negative.
Okay. All right, we're going to keep on the island theme for a few more minutes. We had an inquiry about St. Martin and St. Bart's.
So for St. Martin, COVID tests are required. It's 120 hours prior to departure. You have to complete an online health authorization form, and you need insurance that covers for COVID. Also note that you might be self-monitored while on the island. For St. Bart's, COVID tests are required. It's 72 hours prior to arrival. If you're staying longer than 7 days, you may have to complete a second test while on the island, and you also have to do an online registration prior to entry.
Okay. We'd have a request for more specifics on Jamaica, especially about quarantine requirements. Apparently there was some conflicting information. Can you tell us more?
So the general consensus, if you look on the regulations, it says 14 days. But if you look further into it, basically you have to quarantine for the length of stay. And it also depends on where you're staying. So if you're staying at a private residence, you have to quarantine for the duration at that residence. You're not able to leave. But if you're quarantined at what they call a resilient corridor, which is like a resort or a hotel, they do have the ability to move about at the resorts, but they also have the ability to go to certain excursion points that are on the approved government list.
All right. Another popular destination, Turks and Caicos. What's new regarding access there?
So Turks and Caicos, the COVID test is needed 5 days prior to arrival. You need a travel authorization. You need to complete a health questionnaire and get medical insurance that covers for COVID. Now, when you're doing the health authorization, you're going to have to upload both your COVID insurance and your completed COVID tests on that form.
Okay, thank you. We had a specific request for information about Canwan in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
So for Canwan, U.S. persons can definitely travel there. Currently, for U.S. nationals, it all depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from a high or a low risk state. So if you're coming from a state, for example, that's high, like Florida, you'll have to do a COVID test 5 days prior to arrival. Then you'll be retested upon entry. And then you have to go to a hotel for 5 days, where on the 4th day, they'll perform another test. If all is negative, then you would be able to travel freely. Then if you're coming from a low risk state, states like Louisiana, you would still do the COVID test 5 days before. You would do another COVID test on arrival, wait for those results at the 12 to 24-hour turnaround time, and then you're free to go. The important thing to note here is that today and tomorrow they have elections, and that's why the regulations haven't changed. We're expecting that those regs will change on November 10th, and they should be easing up on those requirements.
Okay, and specifically from in that particular instance, there was an inquiry about moving from arrival to a yacht or a marine vessel versus and then staying on the island.
So the difference there is that if you're coming from a high risk location, you have to fulfill that 5-day period.
Just that. Okay.
Yes, and then go to your yacht. If it's low risk, you can go straight there after the results, and you can disembark. So you don't have to stay at the marina.
All right. We're going to keep moving on. Now we're actually going to take a jump. We're going to leave the islands for just a second, and we're going to go back over to the Asia Pacific region. Inquiry about China, Indonesia, and Uzbekistan. This all made the list, all from one inquiring client. What's the latest there?
So for China, they still are only accepting basically repatriation flights. If you're looking to have a U.S. national travel there, you would likely have to get diplomatic approval as the only form of entry. U.S. crew are still not permitted into the country, so if you're able to get there, you're going to have to drop and go. As far as Indonesia, they are restricting flights for all foreign nationals. The only way to get in there is if you have diplomatic clearance, if you reside there, or if you have a long-term visa that would afford you that entry. And then for Uzbekistan, flights are possible. You have to get special approval. If you do enter, you need a 14-day quarantine because U.S. nationals come from the high risk, also known as the red zone area. You're going to have to complete a health screen on arrival and provide COVID tests in 72 hours prior to entry.
All right. And we're going to continue now. We're going to move to South America. Looks like someone inquired about Colombia, Brazil, and Uruguay restrictions. Any insights there?
So for Colombia, it's open. You need your COVID testing 96 hours prior to departure, and you need to fill out the online form prior to operations. Brazil is wide open. No COVID requirements, no documentation needed. The current restrictions are expiring in 3 days, but it's estimated that they will remain the same. And then for Uruguay, Uruguay is highly restricting all flights. Some exceptions can be for purposes such as family reunion or permanent residence. If you do get approval to get in for such flights, you're going to need COVID testing and you're likely going to be quarantined.
Right. Now we had a slightly different type of question this time around. I guess there's a lot of curiosity as to how we're going about and collecting all of this information that we share, not only here in the webinars, but of course in our weekly COVID comms that hopefully you've been getting for months now. I know it's a very complex overall process, but just to give it a high level, can you give a little bit of insight to our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use a multitude of sources. It can be anything from a note town to an official government site. We use ground handlers. We look at government notices, such as Ministry of Health. They issue memos from different countries. And also, when we speak to handlers, we also from there communicate with border police, essentially customs, because each operation, though there's general guidelines, they may not apply to you. They may not be specific enough. So we may have to get further clarification on what options are available for you.
Okay, good. All right, so that sets the stage. Now we're going to let Christine take a quick breath, maybe a sip of water, and I'm going to turn it over to Lewis. Lewis, I know you've been working in the background, slogging through the chat to see what everyone has on their mind. We'd love to answer a few now. And again, I know we're about at our normal scheduled time. So again, we will have this recorded. So if you need to leave us, we will miss you, but we will keep going, and we'll be sharing out that recording in tomorrow's COVID email. So Lewis, what's at the top of the list for you?
Thanks, Annabelle. Christine, your break's not going to be very long. So jumping right back into it, got a question about a couple countries a little bit further south from our guest today, but can you tell us about Suriname, Nicaragua, and Panama?
So Suriname, they are restricting flights. Central business may be possible. You have to get an approval from the national COVID team in Suriname and civil aviation. If you do get approval, you're going to have to do COVID testing, and you may have to go into quarantine unless you're able to obtain permission to emit that. For Nicaragua, Nicaragua is open. Caribbean passengers can travel there. You're going to need to get testing 72 hours prior to arrival. You're going to need to complete a self-declaration. Now, crew don't need a quarantine, but they are recommended to stay in their hotel room or on the premises. And of course, the aircraft, another unique thing to this country is that you're going to have to do aircraft sanitization, and you're going to have to provide a certificate of that sanitization to authorities prior to arrival. For Panama, Panama is open. Everybody needs to get tested 48 hours prior to arrival, and they may be subject to testing upon entry into the country. No quarantine is needed unless you test positive.
Awesome. I see a couple questions that have come in regarding COVID testing. Let's just go kind of broad here. What are some of the gotchas that you've seen so far with COVID testing, whether the results are not accepted or that they need to be from a certain provider? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the golden rule here is you want to have likely the RT-PCR test, and that requires usually a result in 24 to 48 hours, depending on which vendor you do use. What people get into issues here is they either try to use an antigen test, or the timeline between obtaining the COVID test and the arrival just surpasses that time frame that they give you. It's either 48, 72 hours. Other countries have the 5 or 7 days. So you need to look at that. Because there are people that are using certificates that may not be valid or fake, it's recommended that you have the passport number. The full name is given on the passport with the expiration date, the date of birth, and the nationality. And then just be aware that you're going to have to give it in advance. And there are some countries that I'm seeing lately there. I've noticed that they're calling out some of these take-home tests. So you're going to have to be very careful on which vendor you do use, just to make sure that you're not being denied upon entry.
Great. Barbados. Is the U.S. is a high-risk country according to their standards? Will passengers have to plan on quarantine for 14 days?
So because the U.S. is a high-risk area, of course, you're going to have your COVID test prior to arrival. And then upon entry, you're going to have to quarantine at a hotel for about 4 or 5 days so you can take another test. If that second test comes out negative, then you're free about to go your way. Note that you will be monitored for 7 days, and that monitoring may be done via app, or they may contact you. But it's not a 14-day requirement.
Gotcha. Back to testing. So we have a question about what kind of test it needs to be, a rapid test, or is it a test that takes, you kind of addressed this, but what if the results take 7 to 10 days to get? So in places like Canouan, Barbados, U.S. Virgin Islands.
So for the US, I know that's been an issue in getting that turnaround time. The average given time here, I mean, outside the Caribbean where that time frame is usually larger, is 48 to 72 hours. And you want either the rapid test or the standard PCR test. The difference is that it's going to have to state what type of test it is. And if it's a rapid test, it needs to use a machine that is FDA approved. The Abbott One is one of those FDA approved ones. So there are some vendors that do have that. I think they give a result in 15 minutes.
Excellent. We have a question going back to insurance. I know earlier we discussed that when you get the health visa, your insurance is included in some locations, but in general, is the insurance required a separate rider for COVID, or is it your standard insurance?
It's going to be a separate rider. It needs to specifically cover COVID because a lot of these countries are wanting you to have enough coverage for expenses should you need to attend a hospital or stay there because of testing positive. So it needs to outright say that. And because countries are now requiring that you add that into your health authorization form, they're going to be reviewing that. And if it's not acceptable, they will deny that permission prior to entry.
Great. A couple more Caribbean questions. What's the latest with Antigua and Anguilla?
Antigua and Anguilla. So Anguilla, you can go there. There are restrictions in order to travel out there. So just be aware of, they do have guidelines. I think they require a 14-day quarantine or a 10-day quarantine at a residence. And of course, you have to have COVID testing before and then on arrival too. You also have to have insurance that covers for COVID.
Excellent.
And then the other location you mentioned?
Anguilla.
That was Anguilla.
Oh, I'm sorry, Antigua.
Okay, so Antigua, of course, you need to take a test. It is open and available to U.S. citizens. You can see that there are some areas that are considered tourist zones where other areas are quarantined off for persons looking to enter the country.
Thank you. Looking at Europe again, with the UK locking down, France locking down, how has that impacted travel?
So regulatory-wise, it hasn't really changed anything. The only one I've seen make some change was Portugal. When Canada was removed from the EU safe list, the guidelines, Portugal amended their NOTAM to stipulate that. Other countries like the UK, even though they're going on lockdown, the entry requirements remain the same. So if you're going there for 3 days, you quarantine in place for 3 days, and you can depart. So that hasn't changed. Also, I have found out that hotels are remaining open even during the lockdown. France, just as with the UK, the regulatory aspect of the NOTAM itself has not changed as of this moment. So if you were looking to enter France through that third country, for example, the UK, that's still an option to do so.
Great, thank you. Canada, I know recently they were removed from the European Union's safe list, but what can you tell us about the latest there? Any new restrictions for operators going into or out of Canada?
So that remains the same. It was extended, I think, to November 21st. For foreign nationals looking to go there, essential business has to be quantified with authorities. You're going to want to get approval prior to entry, contacting CanPass. So you're going to want to give them as much information as possible. But they have been strict throughout this whole time on giving that permission. And if you do get approval to get in, of course, upon arrival, you're going to have to potentially resubstantiate that, but also consider that intra-travel is highly restricted. So you would need approval from public health to go from one state to another.
Thank you. We have a question about the specifics for aircraft sanitization. Anything you can share on that?
You want to use a company that can provide you a certificate that's followed certain processes to do so. I do have an example of one that I did receive from Panama that they can kind of show you what it states on there, and we can add that to our email tomorrow just so you guys can see what it looks like. But they have to make sure that the whole aircraft is sanitized. I would say, honestly, it's probably going to be kind of like with the Zika thing where they made you go through everything to make sure that it's all ready to go.
Great, thanks, Christine. Anabel, that's all the questions we've gotten so far from the chat. So I'll hand it back over to you.
Okay, and I know that there was someone that sent me, and my chat's been behaving a little bit strangely because so it locked me up, and then I'm getting some duplicates. But I think I had someone privately, like directly, send me a note about Turks and Caicos. I know we touched on it earlier. But just as a reminder on that, Christine.
Let's see here for Turks and Caicos. Of course, you can go in there. It's the COVID testing is 5 days prior to arrival. And then, of course, you're going to need your travel authorization. You're going to have to complete a questionnaire. And then upon arrival, you're going to have to show that authorization with the medical insurance and the COVID test that you submitted.
All right, just going to try to circle back. All right, anyone else have anything final before we wrap up? And as you're considering that, we'll keep another eye on the chat, but we've also, we have a question on Hawaii, it looks like. We just got a late entry.
So for Hawaii, of course, you have that pre-travel certification that is in place and has been taking place all this time. What I have found out is that as far as the vendors to use in order to go out to Hawaii, the actual official website has a list of what they call trusted vendors. So you need to use one of those in order to get your results and then submit it. But I've also heard conflicting information about the exemptions for crew. I recently had a crew member go in there and were given an exemption to go to their hotel, and they were free about to move their way without the COVID test results. But when speaking to vendors on the field, they are stating that you should be getting the COVID test if you're going to be staying more than 24 hours, just to prevent any uncertainty of having to quarantine in your room for that full time.
All right, that's a good one as well. Again, my list of places to go just keeps growing, so I love this session. And, however, I'm sure Zelda and Nia would tell me that they have the best locations possible. All right. As a reminder here, as we're, thank you. We have someone sharing a great Hawaii resource on the chat, but that's a great segue. So thank you, Joy. Here in the chat, Lewis, I know, has populated several different resources, so please take a look through and make sure you gather those if that's applicable to you. And I cannot thank you enough, everyone, for all of your questions in advance, as well as your live ones. So we're going to wrap up for today, unless there's anything else. I think we're good to go. All right. Great. And thank you for, I said we had people joining us from all over this time around. We will be sending out the recording tomorrow with the update. And also, personally from me, as much as all the ideas that you have after you hang up and you're thinking about it in the next couple of days, drop us a note at operationalinsight@univway.com. I'll have Lewis place that in the chat as well. We are developing these sessions directly from your input, and the more information and ideas you give us, the better. We will look to see you the next time. We're actually going to do a special session at the upcoming virtual NBAA, so that's VBase, that's coming up in the beginning of December. So we're going to have a special session taking place at our booth at that event. That's December 2nd and 3rd. And then we'll probably do one more in December before we wrap up for 2020. So again, send in your suggestions, and it's been a pleasure having you. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.